Welcome into 10 Questions with NBC 10 Boston. I'm Kwani Lunis, and I'm joined today by current Mayor Kim Janey. Welcome, and thank you for spending some time with us today.
Hi, Kwani. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's such a great day.
It is a great day. It's a wonderful day.
And
Well, it's a
your
hot day.
name, yeah, it is a hot day. That's why I'm inside trying to stay cool with the air conditioning because it is scorching at the moment. But for those who aren't aware of your backstory, I do want to backtrack a little bit. You are Roxbury born and raised. What prompted you to officially decide to run for mayor?
Well, I think it's my deep love for my city, and that this is a real moment in our city's history to take our city to a whole new level. Given everything that we've been through in the last 18 months, everything that we have been going through over a long period of time, certainly in our city as it relates to systemic inequities that were all exposed during COVID-19. This was our chance to make sure that we were seizing the moment and creating a stronger Boston for all Boston residents, and a Boston that is and will be more equitable, just, and resilient.
And part of a milestone that you were literally able to be a part of was the fact that you were not only the first Black person, the first Black woman to be a mayor here, Black person and a woman to be mayor in the city of Boston. What significance do you think it was for the residents of the city to see you sworn in?
I think for many residents, as I, connect with people every single day, all across Boston, all ages, all races, I think for many of us, we didn't think we'd see a day, particularly for those of us who grew up here and remember what it was like not to be able to go to certain neighborhoods and to see all of the many ways that our city has come forward. I never thought I would see a Black mayor, even though we had already had, a Black president. I just didn't think I would see it. We had come, close, a couple of times now. And the fact that it has happened, I think, is a great testament to where we are as a city. But obviously, we have so much more work to do. And so, I love being able to serve and lead the city of Boston. The fact that me serving as mayor is historic, as the first woman mayor and the first Black mayor, I think is pretty major and is well received by the residents of Boston. But more than that, it's the work that we're doing every single day on behalf of the residents of Boston. So, representation is important. Representation matters. It certainly, I think, has opened up a pathway for many young people, children who see themselves reflected in me. But, what is really important is the work that we're doing every single day to ensure that we're closing gaps and bringing our city forward in a real meaningful way.
How has your time in office been so far?
It's been incredible. I'm born and raised in this city. I love Boston with all my heart. It is why I fight so hard for my city. And I love being able to be in a position where I can help people and tackle really tough challenges that have been with us. For example, just this morning, I announced a free bus for the number 28 bus. The number 28 bus will be free for 3 months, beginning later this summer, at the end of August, running till the end of November as a pilot program. I've been a long time advocate for public transit and for fare-free buses. And we're doing this on the 28 because it is one of the bus lines that has the most ridership. We know that the people who use this bus are often, in low-income communities of Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, that this is their primary source or mode of transportation. And this is a major economic corridor with 3 Main Street districts: Mattapan Square, Grove Hall, and Nubian Square. So I see it as an economic justice issue. I see it as a racial justice issue, and I see it as a climate justice issue. And so I'm really thrilled to be able to do that type of work, for example.
How hard was it to implement that new program?
It was an investment from the city of Boston. I invested $500,000 working in partnership with the MBTA to make this happen. And it's a pilot, so we're trying to learn from this. We're trying to learn how will behavior change if the bus is free. Will the buses ride more smoothly? Will they be quicker in terms of reliability and staying on schedule? Will we see an increase of riders and fewer cars on the road? And so we're doing a survey, prior to, and we also want to know rider satisfaction. And we know that all door boarding makes the ride smoother when people are not digging in their bags for change and trying to fit dollars into a machine that are too wrinkled and won't go into the machine. And I know this stuff firsthand as someone who doesn't own a car, who has relied on public transit for most of my life. And even now, still as mayor, I get on the T. I took the bus today. I was on the bus a couple of times last week. I've been on the trains. It is important to me that I continue to ride the T and understand the experiences that so many Boston residents and visitors to our city face every single day by taking public transit.
For you personally, has riding the T and using public transportation, has that always been a conscious decision, or was there another reason why?
It's Boston is a very walkable city. And I know a lot of people complain about the T, but it is a T-friendly city in terms of access to different bus routes. Now, there are inequities embedded in our city because there are too many folks, particularly in poor BIPOC communities, that don't live next to rapid transit and can't easily get to a train. And so we see that, for example, Black riders spend 64 more hours on their commutes than their counterparts. And so, but for me, it's a conscious decision. You can pretty much get anywhere. I live not too far from Dudley Station, and you can get anywhere. You can get anywhere in the city. You can certainly get to the Orange Line and the Green Line pretty easily by going to Ruggles and either taking the Orange Line or going down the stairs and getting on the Green Line. You can get to Brookline and other parts of the city. You can get all over the place. You can get to the airport. So it's a T-friendly city. And I find public transit to be a very interesting. Like I enjoy riding public transit. It's never a dull moment. Even when I visit like other cities, like I want to experience someone else's public transit system. So if I'm in San Francisco, if I'm in San Francisco, I'm getting on the BART. If I'm in, DC, I'm getting on the Metro. I want to see what it is like. And it's never a dull moment. Like I've one time I was on a bus. This was years ago. This wasn't as mayor. I was on a bus in Ruggles and the side that goes to the train station.
Oh, yeah.
There was a pigeon inside the bus. I mean, I've seen it all. There's nothing I haven't seen. Now, I can do without the pigeons on the bus.
Yes.
For sure. But there's never a dull moment. It's I don't know. I enjoy it.
And during the height of the pandemic, I would say a lot of reports highlighted the fact that a lot of these communities of color not only stimulated the economy, but they did have to use these forms of public transportation. You talk about it is still a pilot program at the time, but how do you plan on making it sustainable if the surveys check out that it is something that's worth it for the city?
We will have to make sure that we are identifying a revenue stream in which we can continue to invest in. I would hope that we would have some more support from our partners at the state who think this is a good idea. And I'd love to see this expand beyond one bus route and certainly longer than 3 months. But this is, I think, a very important step in the right direction to getting us toward that goal. There are a number of advocacy groups that have been doing incredible work, pushing for fare-free buses, and particularly, even if we can't do it across the entire MBTA system, I think important to identify a few of the routes that need to have fare-free boarding because they're either very congested or in very dense areas. that will help with traffic flow. Maybe they're in poor BIPOC communities where we need to offer that economic relief. So I hope that this is a conversation starter and a way to kind of move us in that direction.
We mentioned you being from Roxbury. What is your earliest memory of wanting to be in politics, if you even had one?
It wasn't something that I sought out as a little girl. I didn't see myself reflected in the leadership that was around in my childhood. As I was growing up in the city of Boston, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me in politics. So it's not something that I really, knew from a very early age that I wanted to be mayor or run for office. I think, I got into community organizing work and child advocacy work in many ways from being a young single mom. I had my daughter very young and right away, knew I wanted to give her every opportunity to succeed and make sure that I was creating a great life for her. I had to delay going to college right away. I had to go to work straight out of high school so I could take care of my daughter. And, at that time, started organizing just around school stuff. So, you're on a college campus in many ways, and there's a lot of activism there. I then, got formally trained in community organizing, and I certainly want to shout out and acknowledge who is now an ancestor, Bob Moses, who I, benefited from, his leadership, and he was just such an icon in the civil rights movement of the 1960s and stayed very active throughout his life. But, during his days, in Mississippi and Freedom Summer and SNCC, in the 1990s, when I was formally trained as a community organizer, was able to benefit from him. And I think this advocacy work, becoming an organizer around early childhood education, and then later on through pre-K through 12 education in Boston, and that advocacy led me to run for Boston City Council, simply because I saw the many ways that my community was being left out of the prosperity in Boston and being pushed out of the community in terms of not being able to afford to stay. So in 2017, I ran for Boston City Council. I became the first woman to represent District 7, and then later went on to become the council president, elected by my peers on the city council. And then when President Biden tapped, then Mayor Walsh, who is now Secretary Walsh, to become the U.S. Secretary of Labor, I became the 55th mayor of Boston. And so it has only been 4 months, but it seems like, there has been so much. Our city, was really grappling with all kinds of complex challenges, everything from a global pandemic and having to lead, our city and continue to lead our city through that challenge. Getting folks vaccinated, making sure that, last spring we could welcome school children back into school buildings. We are doing and preparing that work for this fall. Just so many things happening. And so while it's only been 4 months, we've gotten a lot done and there's still a lot more work to do.
Yeah, we are still in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. How have you balanced being an acting mayor in this city, but also campaigning? We actually did this interview off hours for those who are watching because you still have to fulfill your duties to the city. How do you balance those two?
Well, it certainly takes a lot of time and a deep, deep commitment. And, I love my city and I have worked hard for my city throughout my entire life and career and continue to do so, as mayor of Boston. The hours are certainly long. The weeks are long. I've, had 2 days off in 4 months. So it's a lot, but, our city needs leadership that will help get us through these challenges and make sure that we are doing the work necessary with a fierce sense of urgency around closing the many gaps and systemic inequities that were here long before COVID-19. And so I just put my heart and soul into everything that I do, and just continue to do the work, because that's what needs to be done. And Black women have always just done what needs to be done in terms of getting the work done. So it has been my honor and my pleasure to serve the city of Boston.
In addition to being raised here, you were also educated in this city and talk a lot about being bused to and from your home city to Charlestown to get educated. How was that program like for you, and how do you feel about Metco's existence at this moment?
Yep. And so Charlestown was not part of Metco. Charlestown is a
different busing,
it's a neighborhood here in Boston. And so, but to your point, I have experienced a number of educational experiences. First was a community school that was founded in the late 60s, 70s by Black leaders and parents in Boston, and supported by the Jewish community. And there were a number of community schools like this that had been started because the Boston Public Schools was not serving Black children well. And so that was for kindergarten and first grade. Then I went into Boston Public Schools for second grade. I, went to my local school right there in my neighborhood of Roxbury. And then by 11 years old, when I was entering middle school, is when I was bused to Charlestown, which is a different neighborhood within the city of Boston. And that was during the court-ordered busing that took place in the mid-1970s. And so I faced everything from rocks and racial slurs, and needed police escorts to get to and from school safely. And it was a very difficult, challenging, traumatic time for me as a little girl, and certainly for, residents who also experienced that. But I come from a family of educators. And so my parents were always just, fighting for the best opportunity that they could find for me. And they found that in Metco. So by 8th grade, I did a voluntary busing program versus court ordered. And I went to school in Reading, which is a suburb of Boston.
And how did you enjoy the Metco experience?
It was different. I mean, voluntary versus involuntary is certainly a big difference, but it's not as if there weren't, challenges. Yeah. It's not like, racism suddenly disappears because you are bused a few miles further away. And so the fact that it was voluntary, I think, is very important. And, that people at least welcomed the idea of having school children, from Boston in their schools, and school children who are largely, Black students coming to school. It certainly was a better opportunity in terms of my educational experience. Just looking at the facilities alone, by the time I entered high school, there were several buildings for my high school. It was like a campus. Unlike, some of our high schools here in Boston. And so I certainly got, I think, a better education than I may have gotten had I stayed in Boston Public Schools. But I think all of those experiences really fueled my desire, along with being a young single mom and wanting the best for my own child, to get into child advocacy and promoting equity and excellence in our schools, and wanting every single child or every single student in BPS to have a great educational experience and have that opportunity right in their own city.
You mentioned being a mother, but also a grandmother. How important is that lens to the Boston mayoral seat?
I think, I love my daughter. I certainly love my grandchildren. They certainly, the experiences that I've had throughout my life and throughout my career certainly lend themselves to the work that I do as mayor of Boston. My life experience, my lived experience as a Black woman growing up here in the city is very different than all of my predecessors who have come before me, and in many ways different than others who seek this office. And I bring that lens of equity, justice, and love to this work, having experienced many of the challenges that residents in Boston are facing every single day, whether that is food insecurity, whether that is housing insecurity, and knowing what it is like to raise, a child by yourself, being a young single mom with an apartment that I was able to get with a Section 8 voucher, and needing WIC coupons for my daughter to make sure, I could get the formula that I needed, or the other grocery store items that I needed for my daughter. All of those experiences, I think, help me understand many of the challenges that so many residents in Boston face still to this day. And so I bring that lived experience to this work with a deep, deep commitment to dealing with many of the inequities and trying to close the many gaps that we have here in Boston, whether that be the wealth gap or our opportunity gaps in our schools, doing the work that we need to do around, public transit, around our economy and jobs. And certainly we know the many gaps when it comes to health and health inequity here, not just in Boston, across the country. But like in my neighborhood and where I live, there's a 30-year gap from one zip code to the next zip code in terms of life expectancy. And that shouldn't be in a city as great as Boston, with the resources that we have here in our city. And so we have what we need in Boston to really create this stronger, more equitable, just, resilient city for all of us. And so I'm just grateful that I get to lead as mayor and bring stakeholders together to tackle these challenges together.
You mentioned only having 2 days in the last few months, but when you do get real off days, how do you spend them?
So I haven't had a lot of off days. I've only had the 2. So my birthday was one. My birthday was in May, and I just fiercely, fiercely protected that day. And my inside City Hall staff will tell you, my campaign staff will tell you, like, nope, I'm not going to do it. It's my birthday. And then the second day was like 4th of July. It wasn't quite a full day, but I had responsibilities that morning and then again later that evening. But the midday, like I kept that to myself. I try to kind of find that joy and create that joy wherever I can, and do the things that I need to do to try to, rejuvenate myself even while working. For example, this weekend was just a great weekend. I was at the Lawn on D for Boston While Black. I got to swing double dutch and just enjoy, tap into my inner child and think back to, what it was like growing up, in Roxbury and in the South End, where kids played games outside on the stoop or outside in the street. Like kids,
what's that?
Exactly, kids do video games now, So I was able to do that. I, was able to help spray paint a mural from the iconic Shepard Fairey, who did the Obama Hope poster that we all know. And he was doing a mural at the New England Aquarium. So that was, great and a lot of fun. I was on the mound down at Fenway Park for a Red Sox Yankee game with Belle Biv DeVoe. So, that was a great time. And, those times kind of help because so much of the work is very difficult work. There are a lot of challenges, as I've mentioned, a lot of issues that we are working on to bring our city forward. And so, if I have a moment to play double dutch, on the Lawn on D with some amazing folks at a family reunion, that's great. Were you there? Did you get to go there?
I was supposed to when my family was visiting, so I did not get the chance.
It was great. Yes. Sheena Collier put that together.
Yes,
and just
the Boston While Black group, yes.
Yes, she did an amazing job. It was great. All of the folks who pulled it together, really good.
I plan on making it to the next one.
Absolutely.
Random question, but what is one song that's been heavy on your playlist recently?
Ooh. Well, I I'm an old school girl at heart, but I like a lot of the new music too. So in terms of old school, been listening to Lovely Day. That's like my campaign theme. Bill Withers, love him. Sorry to see him transition not too long ago. I've been tapping into Kirk Franklin and the Georgia Mass Choir, Joy in particular, and seeing the actual video of him just masterfully. This is like when he, first
kind of the 90s.
Exactly. He was so young. I mean, when I look back at this video, it's like, oh my God, look how young he is.
So little.
So I love that. I love really anything old school R&B. Love. Even for me, old school was like 70s and 80s, but now I appreciate too the old school now is like the 90s. Probably for folks like you. So I love all of that 90s R&B, but I like a lot of the newer music. I really like music by Lizzo and Megan Thee Stallion. I like her work. Cardi. A lot of these women artists who are out there. Some of the men as well. Like I'm a big fan of Luke James. Obviously, iconic folks like Erykah Badu and Jill Scott. I love those folks, and I love music. Like I grew up in a time where music was always playing in the house, even more so, particularly my parents. Like they weren't the biggest TV watchers, especially my dad. And my parents
were playing going.
So record players, and they let me play the records like as a kid. Like exactly. Like I can't imagine like letting one of my grandkids come over here record player with albums and a needle that scratches. But so I played like all my parents' 45s growing up, and it was just always music. And so I've always loved music. So I don't know. I get a lot of inspiration from music and just really enjoy it.
And it's multi-generational, which it's great that the versatility is there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mayor Kim Janey, for joining 10 Questions with NBC 10 Boston, and good luck with the rest of your campaign.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.